Mom, it's Christmas. We want you back. Come over. That was the first thing my son Darius said to me after 20 years of silence. No apology, no explanation. Just those words, smooth as butter sliding down the phone line, like he had never erased me from his life. I gripped the receiver so tightly my knuckles cracked. My own son had treated me as if I were dead for 2 decades, and now suddenly he wanted me at his table. The nerve of it made my stomach twist. My eyes locked on the calendar hanging crooked on the wall, December 24th. I had spent every Christmas alone since he walked away, alone with a bowl of instant noodles and the echo of laughter from neighbors who still had families that cared. Now, in the dead of winter, he remembered I existed. Why? His voice was soft, calculated. Mom, Monica's cooking. The kids want to see their grandmother. We just want to make things right. I almost laughed. Those kids didn't even know me. He had made sure of that. For 20 years, he had painted me as a ghost, a burden, a woman not worth mentioning. The last words he said before vanishing slammed back into my memory like a door closing in my face. "You're dead weight." My chest burned with the scar of it. And now, this sudden invitation, no. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about family. This was about money. He thought I didn't know that word had spread that the quiet, broken woman he abandoned had come into $18 million after a long, ugly court battle. He thought he could lure me in with a Christmas turkey and a fake smile, and I would hand him the keys to my fortune. But he was wrong. My breath steadied as I answered. "I'll come." He sighed with relief, too quick, too rehearsed. It confirmed everything. He needed me at that table. He wanted something from me. He had no idea that while he planned his little trap, I had been sharpening mine. I set the phone down and stared at the cross above my mantel. For years, it had been my witness as I wept alone. Now it watched me rise with something stronger than grief vengeance. In the glass reflection of my window, I didn't see a discarded old woman. I saw Evelyn Carter, a survivor forged by decades of betrayal, a woman holding a storm in her chest. Tomorrow, when I walked into that house, I would not be coming as the mother he abandoned. I would be coming as the reckoning he never saw coming. The moment I hung up, my hand lingered on the receiver, trembling not from weakness, but from rage. For 20 years, I had begged for crumbs of affection from Darius. I wrote letters that came back unopened, left voicemails that went ignored, prayed for a single visit on birthdays or funerals that never came. He had left me to rot in silence. And now, because I had money, suddenly, I was good enough for Christmas dinner. The audacity of it made my chest tighten. I sat back in my chair, listening to the old clock tick each second, reminding me how fast time slips away. 20 years gone wasted on a son who saw me as nothing more than a wallet with a pulse. My eyes burned not from sadness anymore, but from clarity. This wasn't reconciliation. This was warfare. And I refused to step onto his battlefield unarmed. I pulled out the worn photo album from under my coffee table, the one I hadn't touched in years. There was baby Darius swaddled in a hospital blanket, his tiny fists clenched. Me at 25, smiling with exhaustion, believing my boy would grow into a man who honored his mother. Flip after flip, the pictures told a story of love I had poured into him like water into dry soil. But the later pages were empty. No graduation photos with me beside him. No wedding invitation. No grandkids on my lap. He had cut me out as if I had never existed. The empty pages spoke louder than any insult he had ever thrown. They were proof of abandonment, proof that the only thing binding us now was blood, and even that had run cold. I closed the album with a snap. If he wanted me at Christmas, I would come. But I wouldn't come as the mother desperate for scraps. I would come as the woman he underestimated, the woman he erased. And I would bring the truth with me like a blade hidden beneath my coat. That night, I called Aunt Bernice. Her voice cracked with both joy and fury when I told her Darius had reached out. "Lord have mercy," she said. "That boy got no shame. He smells money, that's all. Don't you go walking in blind, Evelyn. Promise me." I promised, but my voice carried steel. "I won't be blind. I'll be ready." After I hung up, I dialed Detective Owens. We had spoken before briefly about the settlement money and the vultures it might attract. This time, I told him everything. How Darius vanished for decades, how Monica, my snake of a daughter-in-law, had pushed him to call, how the timing lined up with the whispers of my 18 million. He listened in silence, then said, "If they try anything with your finances, we'll catch them. You're not walking in alone, Ms. Carter. You'll have me watching." Relief and resolve washed over me in equal measure. For once, I wasn't just an old woman standing against a storm. I had allies. I had proof. I had power. As I lay in bed that night, the memories clawed back every Christmas morning. I sat alone watching other families on TV. Open presents, the silence in my house so thick it suffocated me. I remembered the ache in my chest when neighbors asked, "Any word from your son?" and I forced a smile that nearly split my face. I remembered burying my husband alone while Darius stayed away, too proud, too cruel. That pain had hardened into armor now. Tomorrow I would wear it to the battlefield, called Christmas dinner. Sleep came late, but when it did, it was sharp and shallow. I woke before dawn, pulled on my thickest coat, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Wrinkles carved my face, but they were not weakness. They were proof I had endured. My eyes, once dulled by grief, now glowed with something dangerous resolve. I whispered to myself, "They think I'm still the woman who cried when he walked out. They'll see tomorrow I am not her anymore." My breath fogged the glass as if even the air itself carried my vow. Christmas was no longer about reunion. It was about reckoning. When Darius was born, I thought God had handed me a miracle. I was just 25, working double shifts as a nurse's aide at Grady Hospital, living in a cramped apartment with paint peeling off the walls, but I didn't care. The first time I held him, I swore I would give him everything I never had. His father, Charles, was a construction worker with calloused hands and a quiet laugh, and together we dreamed of building a future where Darius would never know hunger or cold. For a while, we managed. Charles worked long hours, I worked nights, and somehow we paid the rent, kept food on the table, and filled Darius's childhood with small joys, birthday cakes baked at midnight, Christmas gifts bought secondhand but wrapped with love afternoons at the park with sticky fingers clutching ice cream cones. Then the accident happened. Charles was killed when scaffolding collapsed on a job site. One minute I was folding laundry, the next, a foreman was standing in my doorway, hat in hand, voice breaking as he told me my husband wasn't coming home. I was 31, widowed with a 6-year-old boy staring at me like I had answers I didn't. I worked myself raw after that. I cleaned houses during the day, took on hospital shifts at night, barely sleeping, my body aching, but my resolve unbroken. Every penny went to Darius, his school books, his sneakers, his shot at a better life. I wore the same coat for 10 winters so he could have new ones. I skipped meals so he could eat. I sat in the bleachers at every basketball game, clapping until my palms stung, even when he pretended not to see me. For years, I believed sacrifice would buy his love. I was wrong. The change came slow, like rust creeping along a fence. First, it was the friends he chose boys who laughed at my old car and called our neighborhood trash. Then, it was the way he spoke to me, rolling his eyes, mocking my worn-out uniform, telling me I embarrassed him. By the time he was 18, he was gone, moving in with Monica's family people with polished cars and manicured lawns who made me feel small when I stood on their porch. I still remember that night. I begged him not to leave, begged him to remember everything I had done. He looked at me with eyes colder than winter and said, "You're dead weight." Then he shut the door in my face. That was the last time I saw him. 20 years. 20 Christmases spent with silence instead of laughter. I called. I wrote. Letters came back unopened. Phone numbers changed. I left messages that never reached him. I showed up once at his birthday party when he turned 30. Monica met me at the driveway, smile sharp as glass, and told me, "You're not wanted here." I left before the neighbors could see me crying in my car. And so, I built my life alone. I worked. I prayed. I endured. I celebrated my 55th birthday with a cupcake I bought for myself. I sat through surgeries with no one in the waiting room. I buried friends while my son lived less than 30 miles away and never once came. That's what 20 years of abandonment looks like: an empty chair, an unanswered call, a photo album with blank pages where milestones should have been. People ask me sometimes, how do you keep going? The truth is, grief hardens. Loneliness becomes routine, and eventually the tears dry up until all that's left is stone where a heart used to be. I thought I was finished with him. I thought the chapter was closed. But then the settlement came and word spread like wildfire. $18 million dropped into the lap of a woman the world thought broken. Suddenly, silence turned to a phone call, and the son who buried me in life wanted to dig me up for Christmas dinner. The irony tasted bitter on my tongue. He didn't want me back. He wanted my money, and I knew I would give him neither. After Darius shut me out, I thought I would wither away. For months, I woke each morning with no reason to rise, sitting at the kitchen table staring at a cold cup of coffee, wondering if this was all my life would ever be forgotten, invisible, discarded like yesterday's trash. But the world doesn't pause for broken hearts. Rent was still due, bills stacked up, and I had no one to lean on. So I forced myself out of bed, tied on my apron, and kept moving. I cleaned houses until my knees ached and my back screamed. I braided hair for neighborhood girls in my living room to scrape together a few extra dollars. I kept my old car running with duct tape and prayer. There were nights I came home too tired to even take off my shoes, collapsing on the couch in my work uniform, waking up only when the alarm told me it was time to do it all again. For a long time, survival was the only goal. And then, slowly, something shifted. I realized that if Darius could erase me so easily, then I owed him nothing. Not my money, not my pain, not my endless forgiveness. I owed myself a life. So I built one brick by brick. I saved every penny I could and opened a tiny beauty salon in a strip mall on the south side of Atlanta. It wasn't glamorous. The walls needed paint. The air conditioner rattled in the summer, and I worked 12-hour days on my feet. But it was mine. For the first time since Charles died, I felt proud. Women came in for braids, perms, and weaves, and they left not just with new hair, but with smiles. My little shop became a hub for gossip, laughter, and sometimes tears. It gave me community, it gave me purpose, and it gave me strength. The years rolled on. I bought myself a small brick house, nothing fancy but steady safe. I planted roses in the yard, red and stubborn, blooming every spring like a reminder that beauty can grow even in hard soil. I traveled once just to see if I could take a bus to New Orleans, walked along Bourbon Street, and felt the beat of jazz seep into my bones. Alone, yes, but free. Then came the fall that nearly broke me. I slipped on a wet floor at a grocery store, cracked my hip, and spent weeks in the hospital. The pain was sharp, but sharper still was the realization that I lay there with no visitors, no son, no grandchildren bringing cards or flowers. Just me staring at the ceiling, fighting to stay hopeful. I decided then that if I was truly alone, I would fight for myself with everything I had left. I sued the store. It took years of depositions, lawyers, and sleepless nights, but eventually the settlement came. $18 million. I nearly fainted when the lawyer read the figure aloud. Me, Evelyn Carter, the woman who once rationed bread to stretch a week, suddenly worth more than I had ever dreamed. At first, I kept it secret. I told only Aunt Bernice and Pastor Raymond. I didn't buy a mansion or a flashy car. I didn't need the world to see me rich. I needed the world to see me unbroken. I paid off my mortgage. I invested in my salon so the young women who worked for me could have steady jobs. I donated quietly to scholarships at the local community college, and I set aside a portion for emergencies locked away in accounts that no greedy hand could reach. Money didn't erase the years of abandonment, but it gave me something priceless: choice. For the first time in decades, I could decide how my story ended. No longer was I the forgotten mother waiting by the phone. I was a woman with power, and power, I learned, is the sweetest armor against betrayal. Which is why when Darius's voice finally crawled back into my life, sticky with fake affection, I recognized it for what it was: a wolf sniffing at the scent of blood money. He thought I would be the same woman who begged him not to leave. He thought wrong. The Christmas invitation wasn't the only surprise. 2 days after that phone call, a thick white envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front in Darius's handwriting I hadn't seen since the 90s. I slid a knife through the seal, and out fell glossy photographs of children, his children smiling in matching red sweaters. A note was clipped to the top. "They want to meet you, Mom. Don't disappoint them." The words sent a chill through me. He wasn't inviting me out of love. He was commanding me like a soldier reporting to a general. And the photographs, they weren't keepsakes. They were weapons. He was dangling the image of grandchildren I'd never met bait on a hook he assumed I'd bite without thinking. I placed the pictures on my table and stared at their faces. They looked nothing like me, nothing like the boy I raised. Their smiles were too polished, their sweaters too neat, like Monica had staged the whole thing for a catalog shoot. I wondered if those children even knew my name, or if I was just a ghost their parents had conjured to extract a fortune. That evening, Aunt Bernice called. "Baby, you better watch yourself," she warned, her voice sharp as glass. I heard from a neighbor Darius been bragging at the barber shop about big money coming his way. Says Christmas is just the start. He's planning on you. My stomach clenched. Bragging. That meant this wasn't a son trying to mend fences. This was a man setting a trap in broad daylight, certain no one would warn me. The next morning, I drove past Darius's house. It was bigger than I remembered, 2 stories with a fresh coat of white paint, but the yard told the real story. Weeds creeping through the cracks, toys scattered but broken blinds hanging crooked in the windows. On the porch sat Monica Phone glued to her ear, pacing like a cat ready to pounce. When her eyes caught my car, her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. She waved, not in welcome, but in warning. I didn't wave back. Later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. "We should talk about your will, Mother. The future depends on it. Darius." Attached was a PDF of a drafted legal document, a will that named him and Monica as sole beneficiaries. My name, my life's work, my money all funneled neatly into their pockets, leaving nothing for anyone else. I forwarded the email straight to Detective Owens. He called within an hour. "Ms. Carter, this isn't just greed. This is premeditated exploitation. They're laying groundwork. They want control over you, your accounts, your estate. If you sign anything, they'll bleed you dry." I exhaled slowly, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Then they'll find out I'm not the fool they think I am. But the scheme didn't stop there. 2 nights later, Pastor Raymond phoned me after evening service. His voice was low, hesitant. "Evelyn, I overheard Monica speaking to one of the deacon's wives. She was laughing about how you wouldn't last long, how stress and age would do the work for them once they had the papers signed. Evelyn, she said you were halfway to the grave already." My chest tightened, fury thrumming in my veins. Not only did they want my money, they were counting on my death to speed their reward. My own flesh and blood. I sat at my desk that night, pulled out a fresh notebook, and began to write. Every call, every letter, every threat disguised as kindness, I documented it all, page by page. The photographs, the email, the overheard conversation. Evidence. Proof. If they thought I would step into their snare blind, they underestimated me once again. By the end of the week, my notebook was thick with records. I looked down at the words scrawled across the cover in bold ink, "Carter Family Betrayal, Exhibit A." Christmas was 3 days away. The scheme was in motion. They believed they had me cornered. But I was no longer the mother who begged at closed doors. I was Evelyn Carter, and I was ready to turn their trap into their downfall. The night I labeled that notebook Exhibit A, something inside me shifted. For years I had begged for love, but now I was preparing for war. And wars are not won with tears, they are won with preparation. I began with the photographs Darius mailed me. I slipped them into clear plastic sleeves and noted the date and time they arrived. At first glance, they were just innocent family portraits. But when I zoomed in on my phone details, told another story, Monica's manicured nails holding the children's shoulders too tightly, the faint watermark of a photography studio in the corner. They hadn't been taken as gifts. They were props. Next came the email with the will. Detective Owens told me to print 3 copies. 1 went into the notebook, 1 into a locked drawer at the salon, and 1 directly into his hands. "If they pressure you at dinner," he said, his jaw tight, "this will prove intent." Judges don't look kindly on children trying to strong-arm parents into signing away estates. But I knew talk of wills was only part of it. Darius and Monica weren't patient people. If they were already bragging about my money, they'd want shortcuts. So I visited my bank, sat across from a young teller who recognized my name instantly. "Ms. Carter," she whispered, glancing around 2 days ago. "Someone tried to access your accounts online. Wrong passwords, but multiple attempts. The system flagged it." My blood ran cold. "Did you see the name?" She shook her head. "No, but the IP address traced back to the suburbs. I'll escalate it." That was enough for me. They weren't just dreaming about my money, they were clawing at it already. I called Aunt Bernice that evening. She listened as I explained every detail, then let out a long sigh. "Child, they're digging their own grave. You just make sure you've got the shovel ready when it's time to cover it." Her words stayed with me, so I armed myself further. At the salon, I set up an old phone with a recording app letting it run whenever clients sat in my chair. Sometimes gossip traveled faster than truth, and sure enough, a neighbor of Monica's came in for a perm. Mid-conversation, she chuckled. "That Monica, she's been talking about a big payout coming. Said her kids won't ever need scholarships because Grandma Evelyn gonna cover college soon." The words made my stomach twist, but I smiled politely, letting the recording capture everything. Evidence piece by piece. Pastor Raymond offered another layer of protection. He introduced me to a friend of his, a retired notary who agreed to witness anything I needed documented. We signed affidavits of the threats Monica had made at church, her cruel words about me being halfway to the grave. Each affidavit was stamped, sealed, and tucked safely away. By the time Christmas Eve rolled around, my notebook had grown thick-heavy in my purse like a shield. Every page was a reminder that I wasn't walking in blind. If they tried to humiliate me, if they tried to coerce me, I would not only defend myself, I would expose them. That night, as I prepared for bed, I laid out my outfit for the next day. A deep burgundy dress, simple but elegant, with my late husband Charles's cross necklace resting on top. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Armor of memory and dignity. I packed my purse carefully, the notebook copies of the will, a small recorder Detective Owens had given me, and a folded photo of Charles holding baby Darius back when love still lived between us. As I zipped the purse shut, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Wrinkles lined my face. Yes, but behind them burned something fierce. For 20 years, I had been the forgotten mother. Tomorrow, I would be the reckoning. When I finally lay down, sleep came heavy but dreamless. I woke at dawn with the sound of rain tapping against the window. The storm was already here, but I wasn't afraid. I had everything I needed. Tomorrow, Christmas dinner wouldn't be their stage. It would be my courtroom. The Carter house smelled of cinnamon and deceit. As I stepped inside, the warmth of roasted turkey and spiced cider clung to the air, but it couldn't disguise the frost in the eyes that turned toward me. 20 years gone, and now I was a spectacle. Darius strode forward, arms spread wide as though we were actors in some family play. "Mom!" His voice rang out too loud, too bright. He kissed my cheek, but his eyes darted to the purse on my arm. Not love. Calculation. Behind him, Monica appeared in a glittering dress that caught the light like broken glass. Her smile was all teeth. "We're so glad you could make it, Evelyn. The children have been dying to meet you." The children shuffled forward, polite rehearsed. They murmured, "Hello, Grandma," as Monica's hand pressed firmly against their backs. I gave them soft smiles, but my heart broke. They were props tonight, pawns in their parents' scheme. Dinner was served at a long mahogany table. Candles flickered, glasses clinked, and laughter rose too easily, too forced. I barely touched my plate. Darius filled his wine glass twice before leaning back, grin curling at the edges. "You know, Mom," he began, voice syrupy sweet, "it's funny how life brings us full circle. After all this time, here we are again together. Like family." "Family," I echoed, my voice calm. Funny word, that. Monica leaned in, her bracelets jangling. "And family looks out for each other, doesn't it? Especially when there's legacy involved." The room quieted. Even the children paused forks midair. I reached into my purse and laid the thick notebook on the table. Its spine hit the wood with a thud that cut through the tension. "You mean this legacy?" I asked, sliding the first page open. Darius blinked, confusion flickering, then annoyance. "What's that?" "Exhibit A," I said. My voice carried steady. "A record of every lie, every threat, every attempt to get your hands on what doesn't belong to you." Monica's face tightened. "Now, Evelyn, there's no need to bring up." I cut her off. November 12th. Monica. You told a church member I was halfway to the grave already. I have the affidavit. Would you like me to read it aloud? Gasps rose from the far end of the table. Pastor Raymond, seated quietly near the children, gave a solemn nod. Darius slammed his glass down red wine, splattering the white tablecloth. This is ridiculous. No, I said, pulling out the printed email. What's ridiculous is this. Will you drafted naming yourself and Monica as sole beneficiaries. What's ridiculous is the bank alert about someone trying to hack my accounts. What's ridiculous is bragging in barbershops about money you haven't touched. His face drained of color. You can't prove. Detective Owens can. Right on cue, the front door opened. Owens stepped in, badge flashing at his belt, 2 uniformed officers behind him. Gasps turned into whispers. Monica shot to her feet, voice shrill. This is harassment. We're just trying to reconnect with family. Owens lifted a folder. We have evidence of attempted financial exploitation, coercion, and fraud. You've both been sloppy. Very sloppy. The children began to cry, confusion clouding their faces. I looked at them with sorrow, then back at their parents. You wanted me here tonight to sign papers, to hand you my life's work on a silver platter. Instead, you handed me all the rope I needed to hang your scheme. Darius's voice cracked. Mom, please don't do this. We're family. I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving his. Family doesn't abandon a mother for 20 years. Family doesn't wish her dead. Family doesn't come crawling back only when there's money on the table. Whatever we were that ended the night you shut the door in my face. Silence. Heavy final. Owens gave the nod and the officers moved in. Metal cuffs clicked around Darius's wrists, then Monica's. Their protests echoed through the house, but no one moved to defend them, not even their own children. As they were led out, I stood smoothing my burgundy dress, Charles's cross glinting at my throat. I turned to the room, neighbors, distant cousins, strangers who had watched this circus unfold. Merry Christmas, I said quietly. May yours be filled with love that money can't buy. The candles flickered, the wine glasses trembled, and for the first time in 2 decades, I felt something close to peace. The morning after Christmas, my phone would not stop ringing. Neighbors, church members, even old clients from the salon everybody had heard. News in our part of Atlanta travels faster than light, and when police cars show up at your doorstep on Christmas night, tongues wag. I didn't answer most calls. I sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used through the leanest years and let the silence of my own home wrap around me like a blanket. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The air smelled of wet earth, fresh and clean, as though the storm had scrubbed the world. By noon, Aunt Bernice arrived, her cane tapping against the porch steps. She didn't wait for me to open the door. She let herself in, her voice carrying. Evelyn Carter, you done shook the whole tree and let the rotten fruit fall. I laughed at the sound, surprising even me. It was the first real laugh I'd felt in years. They thought I'd roll over Bernice. They thought I was still that broken woman. She lowered herself into the chair opposite me, eyes shining. You proved them wrong. But Lord, did you see Monica's face when the cuffs clicked? She looked like someone snatched the crown off her head. We both chuckled, but behind it was grief too. Darius was still my son. No amount of betrayal could erase that truth. Yet grief didn't mean weakness anymore. It meant acknowledgement, not surrender. Later that week, Detective Owens visited to update me. The DA's office is moving fast, he explained, flipping through a thin folder. Charges include attempted fraud, conspiracy to exploit an elder, and unauthorized access to financial accounts. The evidence you gathered is airtight. I nodded, the weight of my notebook still heavy in my mind. What happens next? There'll be hearings, probably a trial if they don't plead out. But rest assured, Evelyn, they won't be bothering you again anytime soon. When he left, I sat in the quiet, staring at the small Christmas tree I'd decorated alone, its twinkling lights reflected in the window, soft and steady. For once, the loneliness didn't sting. It felt earned, chosen. Word spread quickly through the community. At Sunday service, whispers followed me down the aisle. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration. Pastor Raymond shook my hand firmly at the altar. You did what you had to Sister Carter. The good book tells us to guard our hearts. You guarded yours. But not everyone approved. One cousin cornered me after church, her lips pursed. He's still your boy, Evelyn. Blood is blood. How could you put your own son in jail? I looked her in the eye, steady as stone. He stopped being my boy when he wished me dead. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal." She said nothing more. Days turned into weeks. Letters came, some from strangers who read about the case in the local paper, thanking me for standing up, telling me they too had been taken advantage of by family. One woman wrote, "Your strength gave me courage to cut ties with my sister. I finally feel free." But the letters from Darius were different. His handwriting was jagged, desperate. "Mom, please, Monica made me do it. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I need you. Forgive me." I folded each letter and slid it into a box unread beyond the first lines. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Forgiveness is not owed. Monica, on the other hand, sent nothing. Silence from her was louder than any words. Financially, nothing changed. I still had my house, my salon, my investments. But inside, everything shifted. For the first time, I walked into my shop with my head high, not just as a business owner, but as a woman who had defended herself and won. Clients looked at me differently, their conversations peppered with admiration. One afternoon, a young stylist pulled me aside. "Miss Evelyn, you showed us something, that we don't have to take it, that we can stand up." Her words sank deep. Maybe that was the true inheritance I had to give, not money, but courage. As winter thawed into early spring, I tended to the roses in my yard. Their stems were thorny stubborn, but buds formed at the tips, ready to bloom again. I thought of Charles, of the baby boy we once held together, of the decades between that moment and now. Loss, betrayal, survival, justice. They were all woven into the same soil. The fallout wasn't just theirs, it was mine too. But unlike them, my fallout led to peace, not ruin. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. I had sat in waiting rooms before doctors' offices, banks, even funeral homes, but never here, never as the mother of a man standing trial. My palms rested on the notebook in my lap, its pages dog-eared from weeks of use. Exhibit A, the shield that had carried me through. When they brought Darius and Monica in, the room shifted. Shackles clinked against the floor, and whispers rippled across the benches. Darius looked older than his 40 years, eyes sunken, jaw tight. Monica, by contrast, held her chin high, lipstick sharp as a blade. She scanned the room, searching for sympathy, but found none. The prosecutor rose first, outlining the charges with clinical precision: attempted fraud, elder exploitation conspiracy, and unlawful access of financial accounts. Each count stacked like bricks in a wall they could not climb. Then came the exhibits, my exhibits. The email draft of the will, the affidavits, the bank logs, the recordings. Piece by piece, the puzzle was laid bare. When my turn came to testify, I stood slowly, Charles's cross resting against my chest. My voice did not shake. "I am Evelyn Carter, mother of the defendant. 20 years he was gone. When money came suddenly, I was family again. But not for love, for profit. They asked me to sign away my life. They laughed about my death. I will not apologize for defending myself." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge's pen paused above his notepad. Monica's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, lonely, vengeful. "Isn't it true you resented your son for leaving?" he pressed. I met his gaze. I resented abandonment, yes, but resentment does not forge fake wills. Resentment does not hack bank accounts. They made those choices, not me. When I stepped down, Pastor Raymond caught my hand in the gallery, giving it a quiet squeeze. The defense faltered. Monica cracked first. On the third day, during cross-examination, she slipped. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she cried, voice echoing against the high ceilings. Gasps rose from the benches. Darius's shoulders sagged. By the fourth day, the jury had heard enough. Their deliberation lasted less than 3 hours. On all counts, the foreman announced, "We find the defendants guilty." The judge's voice was steady, firm. "Darius Carter. Monica Carter, you are sentenced to 5 years each in state prison with mandatory restitution. You will have no contact with Evelyn Carter without court approval." The gavel cracked like thunder. I sat very still, the words washing over me. Not triumph, not joy. Something deeper, relief, solid and undeniable. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. A reporter shoved a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Carter, do you have any words?" I thought carefully, then spoke. "Family is supposed to protect, not prey. Blood alone doesn't make you kin. Actions do." Then I turned away, the crowd parting as I walked. In the weeks that followed, the quiet was different than before. Not empty, but clean. The letters from Darius stopped. Monica vanished into silence. Their children were placed with Monica's sister, safe cared for. I prayed for them every night that they might grow free of their parents' poison. At the salon, clients whispered less and smiled more. "You showed us, Miss Evelyn," one said as I trimmed her hair. "Showed us we don't have to take it, not even from family. Even the bank teller who had first warned me slipped me a note. Proud of you." The law had spoken. Justice had been carved into stone, and I once forgotten, once discarded, had been heard. That evening, I sat in my garden roses budding in the cool spring air. I pressed my hands into the soil, feeling its grit, its life. Charles had always said roses bloomed best after a harsh pruning. Perhaps people did too. For 20 years, I had been pruned to the root. Now, at last, I was blooming again. Spring rolled into summer, and my world grew quieter, steadier. The scandal had faded from headlines, and people moved on to fresher gossip. But in my heart, the ripples still spread. Some days I woke and felt the ache of what could have been family dinners, laughter with grandchildren, the son I once held close. Other days I rose with a sense of triumph, the knowledge that I had defended my dignity and lived to see justice done. Both truths lived inside me side by side. I poured my energy into the salon. We repainted the walls a soft cream, added fresh mirrors, and opened 2 new chairs for younger stylists. They looked at me not just as an employer, but as an example. Miss Evelyn, one of them, said as she swept the floor, "You taught us we don't have to beg for love. We can demand respect." I smiled because she was right. In June, I made a decision. Instead of hoarding the money, instead of letting it gather dust in accounts that Darius once tried to pry open, I created something new, the Carter Resilience Scholarship. Each year, it would fund the education of 3 young people from our community who had been raised by single parents or grandparents. I thought of my own lonely kitchen table, the endless nights of double shifts, and knew this was the right way to honor those struggles. When the first recipients came to meet me, their eyes wide with gratitude, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. It wasn't the hollow flattery of relatives sniffing around for money. It was real, tangible hope. Aunt Bernice visited often cane-tapping as she walked the rows of roses in my yard. "You turned your pain into purpose, Evelyn," she said one evening watching the sun dip low. "That's the best revenge there is." I nodded. Revenge wasn't rage anymore. It was building something that outlived betrayal. At church, Pastor Raymond wove my story into his sermons, not by name, but in parables. "Guard your heart," he told the congregation, "and remember that family is proven in deeds, not in words." People glanced my way, some nodding, some whispering. I didn't mind. Let my story be a warning, a beacon, whatever they needed it to be. As for Darius and Monica, the silence from prison was complete. No more letters, no more pleas. Perhaps they had accepted their fate, or perhaps they had simply given up trying to sway me. I didn't dwell on it. My energy was mine now, not theirs. On my 66th birthday, the stylists threw me a small party at the salon. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a homemade cake sat lopsided on the counter. As they sang, I looked around the room, the young women, the clients, the community I had chosen, and who had chosen me in return. Not blood, not obligation. Choice. Later that night, I sat alone in my garden, the cicadas humming the roses in full bloom. I thought of Charles, of the boy Darius, once was of the long road between then and now. I whispered into the night I did the best I could. And for the first time, I believed it. The moral was clear, as sharp as the thorns on my roses. Family is not defined by DNA, but by loyalty and respect. Love without action is just manipulation. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival. To anyone listening, especially those over 50 who feel abandoned, betrayed, or used, I want you to know this. You are not powerless. You are not too old to fight. You can reclaim your dignity, your future, your peace. And sometimes justice comes not with fury, but with evidence, patience, and the courage to say enough. So I live on, not as the forgotten mother, not as the abandoned wife, but as Evelyn Carter, survivor builder and woman who bloomed after pruning. And that perhaps is the sweetest revenge of all.